So, big welcome to today's class as we look at the leader's relationship to themselves, the development of their character and formation as a leader. As we look at leadership development in greater detail, and at the end of today's class, we will set a leadership assignment where we will ask you to reflect on ways in which you can develop a greater understanding of yourself and every aspect of yourself, your emotions, your relationships, your thinking, in that as you know yourself, you're better able to lead yourself as you lead others. We often lead out of who we are. We often lead out of what we think and feel. And it's important to understand ourself and our feelings and our thinking if we're going to be effective leaders. So at the end of today, we would like you to write a reflection on how you can develop a greater understanding of yourself and your character and formation and develop yourself. And we would ask you to include some scholarly references, such as those that you can get from Google Scholar on leadership development. And we would ask you to include some of that in your writing and say, this scholar says, that scholar says, and write about that. Self-understanding and commitment to your own personal growth as a person and a leader is vitally important to becoming an effective leader. It means not just growing in confidence and skill and motivation, but maturing as a whole person who understands their emotions, their thoughts, their values, where they come from, how they're outworked, how we relate to one another, how we develop mentally and psychologically and spiritually, how we grow and how we handle challenges that we face. Let us pray as we begin. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you are at work in each area of our lives, and as we reflect on the nature of who we are and calling, that we can be open to your guidance, open to your spirit, open to your word speaking to us, so that we might become more effective in every area of life, including leadership and including the leadership of ourselves and the outworking of all good purposes that you have for us in every area of life. Amen. It's important as leaders to develop in every area of life. And so we should develop all of the areas of life that God calls us to. So physically, exercise is important. Mentally, healthy thinking is important. Relationally, it's important that we develop in understanding relationships and in our relationships with others. In experience, it's important that we take on new opportunities and experience. In knowledge and learning, as you are doing, and in practice in what we do. And so we encourage you to reflect on ways in which you are growing, but also on the nature of who you are and the nature of every aspect of your life. Today, we're looking at your identity as a person, your character and your personhood as a leader and as a person. It's important to remember, as we read in Genesis chapter 1, that you are created in the image of God. That is, you're created good. You have potential. And there are many valuable good aspects of life. You are a miracle of God's creation. Your ability to think and feel and relate is a miraculous gift from God. Genesis 3 reminds us that we also have troubles. We sin, we go astray. And Genesis 3 gives some reasons for that. Sometimes we can be proud, we can not listen, we can act too fast without listening. There can be many reasons why, like Adam and Eve, we get into trouble. And so it's important to be careful, be wise, as the Proverbs remind us that we need to listen and not speak too soon, and not act too soon. But when we do get into trouble, God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit are there to heal and restore, just as they did in many places in the Bible. I want to begin with Jay Conger's framework of personal growth. So, can I get everyone to write down Jay Conger? And Jay Conger has written on leadership development. And we could find out more by going to Google Scholar and looking up some resources on leadership development from Jay Conger, leadership development. And we'd find some valuable resources here. Leadership by Design is one of the programs that Jay Conger has developed, and we could look at some of the material there. Even better is probably going to Google Scholar, and at Google Scholar, again, we could put in Jay Conger leadership and leadership development, and we could find some resources here on leadership development as well. Interesting, there's an article on the dark side of leadership, developing leadership capacity. And so there's lots of resources that you could find there by Jay Conger. So I encourage you for today's assignment to go to some of these, and you would see some insights into leadership and what leadership involves. And so Jay Conger is a professor of organizational leadership who has some valuable insights for us. And when we put his name into Google Scholar, then we're able to cite the resource, make a copy of that, read the resource, interact with the resource. If we wanted more resources similar to that, we could click on related articles, and there's further articles by other scholars on leadership that we could read as well and cite and interact with, and there's books there that we could read. So there's many resources available to us. Jay Conger says the development of leaders is very important. Leaders need ability and skill and competence and authority that comes through knowledge, but they also need to grow as persons. They need to reflect on who they are. They need to adapt. They need to develop values and ethics. They need to develop intelligence, but emotional intelligence also. That is, they need to understand feelings and emotions and how best to respond to them. When someone says something we disagree with, it's natural to get angry or annoyed. We need to understand that and handle that wisely and patiently and carefully. We need to develop social skills in relating to others as well. So, in his analysis of leadership development, Jay Conger said effective leaders need 4 aspects of leadership. Firstly, they need to grow as people. You don't stop growing when you reach 16 or 18 or 20 or 22 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 years of age. We are always growing. And so we need to understand how and where we grow best, or how and where and when we go backwards. And you can see a person who's listening and learning and apologizing and saying, I will try harder. They're growing. And you can see another person who says, I'm not going to listen to that. And they close up and they decline and become less of the person that they could be. So the first thing that Jay Conger says we need is personal growth as a person. As a person who reflects, who thinks, who learns, who relates, who grows. Secondly, we need concepts that help us understand leadership. One concept for understanding leadership is a triangle which points downwards, which sees the key person at the top and then sees other people underneath. And the leader is the person at the top. That's a dominant position of leadership. And sometimes that's needed. If you were a nurse giving first aid and telling others what they should do, then sometimes you need to be at the position at the top, clearly explaining what needs to be done. However, you can't be a dominant leader like that all the time. Sometimes you need to listen to the other people and you need to be like the person who's down below. Servant leadership can be very important as well. So these are two different concepts of leadership: dominant leadership, humble leadership. We have to be careful, if we're going to be humble servant leaders, that we're not just surrendering to everything the other person says. Otherwise, they'll just dominate us. And so relating, discussing can be very important as well. And so perhaps a better form of leadership would be a form of leadership that is interactional leadership, where we interact with the other people. So these are three different concepts that can be useful. And so it's worth thinking about, what are the concepts that you hold in regards to leadership? We've talked a lot about servant leadership, but when do you think you need dominant leadership? I get everyone to write down an example of when you need dominant leadership. For example, when you have greater knowledge, you might want dominant leadership, or in an emergency. So can everyone think of examples when you need dominant leadership? And can you think of examples when you need relational leadership? So relating leadership, or relational and interactional leadership, is where you're wanting to learn through talking to the people. And then the other form of leadership we talked about was the surrendering leadership. And surrendering leadership might be when others have knowledge. Maybe as a teacher, there can be times when I surrender to you. I don't tell you everything to write in your assignment. I surrender to you. And so in teaching, even though we might know a fair bit, we still surrender to the person. A mother or a father might surrender to the children, be humble and be serving. And so these are different concepts of leadership, And Conger says this is another aspect of leadership that we need. We need concepts and understandings of leadership. He could also add knowledge. We need knowledge of the tasks, what is required. And as a Christian leader, we need knowledge of Bible and we need knowledge of the various tasks. If we're a music leader, we need knowledge of what's required in music. So all of these things are aspects of what we need. Conger also said we need feedback. It's not enough to simply know some things. We have to listen to others and we have to be open to them speaking to us about how we're going. And I found that challenging when I was a preacher. And so when I was learning to preach, sometimes I'd preach a message and people would come up to me and say, "That's very good, Sam Hay. You've done a great job." But really, I needed to also learn some more. And someone came up to me once and said, "You need better theology." And so that's interesting. I had to study God and Jesus and theology more and learn. Are you open to feedback? Are you open to listening? And how do you feel when people give you negative feedback? When they say, "This is not so good, you need to improve." As a teacher who marks your assignments, I struggle with this. I know someone who gives their students 3 out of 10 because they feel that tells them they need to improve. Hands up anyone I've given you 3 out of 10 so far. I don't tend to do that. All right, we do have someone who got 3 out of 10. But I think you need encouraging. So I usually give you 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, sometimes even 10. And so I think you need some encouragement. Sometimes I say positive things like, "Your assignment, you have done very well." And then having buttered you up with some nice sugary sweet icing, "You have done very well." As a teacher, I then come in and say, "But you could improve by." And then I give you some of that. And then so you don't feel too bad. Sometimes at the end I said, "But overall, it was quite good." And so sometimes we've got to do that. We've got to speak positively and encouragingly, and then we've got to give feedback that helps people correct and improve. And then we've got to also encourage them again as well. And it's a challenge to balance positive, encouraging feedback and corrective feedback. And a leader has to give corrective feedback. And if you're going to grow as a leader, you need to find people who will give you corrective feedback. Sometimes I ask my family members for corrective feedback and they just give me lots and lots. "You need to improve here. You need to improve there. You need to improve there." And I say, "Whoa, that's enough corrective feedback." So the third area that Conger says you need to grow as a leader is feedback. And then the fourth area you need is experience and skill building. Some of it can come from books, but then a lot of it also needs to come from practice and growing in skills. And so in terms of growing in relationships, I read, I study, I learn, but then I go out and I work with people and I grow there as well. In terms of preaching, I read about how to preach, I write my sermon, and then I preach, and then I listen, and I ask, how could I improve? So Conger emphasizes 4 aspects of personal growth. The first one is that you need to grow as a person, understand yourself, understand your emotions, Understand every aspect of who you are, your values, what drives you, what motivates you, your interests, what you're good at. You need to understand yourself. Secondly, he says you need some knowledge of the tasks and what is required. You need concepts that help you understand what is required, such as these three different models of leadership: dominant leadership, relational, interacting leadership, and serving leadership. And then thirdly, you need feedback from others that helps you improve. And then fourthly, you need practice whereby you build your skills. So that's Conga's model. In terms of the first aspect, knowing yourself, you need to understand what gives you a sense of identity. Can I get everyone to write down what gives you a strong sense of identity? And the ladies may be different to the men here. Men often get their identity from doing, from a very strong sense of mission, whereas the ladies sometimes get a strong sense of identity from being. Can I get everyone to talk to someone next to you now for the next 1 to 2 minutes? What gives you a strong sense of identity? Is it what you do, like playing a musical instrument? Is it relationships? Some people are more relational. Is it success? Some people are more motivated by success. What gives you a strong sense of identity? Some people get identity from their families, from their friends, from who they are in relationship to others, who they belong to. Some get strong identity from their beliefs and values and goals, truth. Some get identity from their culture or history or background. Some get identity from experiences and they like excitement and challenges. Some get identity from caring and compassion. What gives you a strong sense of identity? Has everyone written down some of those things that give you a strong sense of identity? Does someone in the second row want to share with us what gives them a strong sense of identity? To share? Worth reflecting on how we all have different things that motivate us and give us a sense of value and doing well and a sense of identity. And we shouldn't expect them all to be the same. If you build a team of 10 people, don't expect them all to get the same driving sense of identity from the same thing. Some might be more social. Others might be more task oriented. Others might be more values oriented. So different people will have different drivers for a sense of identity. Anyone want to share? Otherwise, I'll move on to the next point. Some of the ways you can develop a deeper sense of understanding your sense of identity. One is through journaling, writing down. And one of the things you could do today is begin to write down and journal. Aha, I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, sir.
Yeah. Any thoughts on what gives you a strong sense of identity?
Friendship.
Yeah, that can. Yeah. When I was a preacher, I used to get it from preaching. Yeah. 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 So all of those things can give you a sense of identity, but you need a sense of identity in God and Jesus as well. And our identity is complex. It comes from relationships, it comes from what we do, how we feel. And some things go up and down. Feelings go up and down, and we need to be careful. Our identity doesn't go up and down. God still loves us. God still cares for us. We're still saved. And so our identity, when it's grounded in God and Jesus, it shouldn't move so much. But at the same time, it's natural to have some sense of identity through what we do. We can get a sense of identity from when we do well. So if you preach well, but as a Christian, I should also be able to find that when I don't preach so well, I can go to God and Jesus and they can encourage me. Even though that preaching didn't go so well, you are a son of God. I am with you. So our identity shouldn't mainly come from what we do, though that can be important. It should also come from our relationship with God and Jesus and who we are in relationship with God and Jesus. So it's important to take time to reflect on who we are and how our identity can come from what we do and success. But what about when we aren't successful? And that'll happen at times. We are still God's creation, a miracle of God. We are still in relationship with God. We are still saved in Jesus. And so it's important to have an identity there. We can have a greater understanding of our emotions. And as I've grown as a leader, I've sought to better understand my emotions because I know sometimes they can go up when things go well and I get 9 out of 10 on an assignment. And then sometimes I can be very challenged when I get 3 or 4 out of 10 on an assignment. But the important thing is that I'm learning and I'm growing. Sometimes I can pay good attention to detail, other times I can pay less attention to detail, and someone else in the team can come up and say, Sam, hey, you didn't pay as much attention as you could. And I think I have to listen to that and grow. By keeping a diary and writing down, I felt sad when someone said to me I had not kept enough attention to detail. I can reflect on how I feel and grow. So keeping a journal or a diary can be very helpful. I found also by setting guidelines, that is timing and a calendar, I can give greater attention to detail. In relationship with others, sometimes people come up to me and say, you didn't relate well to that person. And I can think, how can I develop relational skills? So by journaling, reflecting, listening to others, I'm able to grow. It's important for us to develop skills to control our emotional responses and to keep calm. I was a school teacher for many years, and sometimes students would be annoying, and I would have to learn to keep calm. As a pastor in a church, I would find that there were challenges, and it's important to keep calm. I arrived at church one day, and the lock wouldn't open, and there was all the people waiting to go in. And in the end, I think we got a piece of card and we slipped it in to the lock and we were able to open it up. And then we went in and the sound system wouldn't work. And so I organised the singing and we had to begin without sound. So being a pastor, you can face some challenges like that. And I had to keep calm. Then I think the lights didn't work and everything went dark. So we opened doors and windows to let light in, but we pressed on. And then the lights came back in somewhere. So there can be challenges as a leader, and it's important to keep calm. And when you're writing an assignment, there may be times when you write the assignment and you feel it's not going well, but you've got to press through, keep calm, and hand it in. It's important. It's important that you know your strengths. Every person here in the class has different strengths. Hands up if you're a good musician. So some of the people in the class are good musicians. I'm not. I
Well,
play, yeah, so we've got a couple of good musicians. I play about three chords on the guitar, A and G and D, and that's my musical ability. I play the piano, and then people in my family tell me, you only play one song. That's all I know. Yeah, so we need to know our strengths. Hands up if you're a singer. We've got some good singers here. And so there's some people there. So we've all got different strengths and abilities. Sometimes I think I've got some academic strength, and then I go and talk to some super academics, and I realize I've just got a little bit of academic strength. So we all have people who are better than us, all have people who don't have the same abilities to us. So know your strengths, know your weaknesses. And so we each have different weaknesses. So be aware of them and respond to them. When I was studying once, I realized I didn't know enough. And then I went and put in some time and learnt some more. And that's how I grew. And I've asked other people, how do you study and learn? We often lead out of who we are, and it's important that we understand who we are and our abilities, and that we bring in other people who have other abilities that can work with you. And so when I was a pastor of a church, I had other people who were good musicians, other people who were good singers, good youth leaders, good children's workers, and other people who had other abilities, and I worked with them. You're only one of the many abilities in the team, but you are an important part of what is happening in the team. And as you take on leadership, then you have important roles. As I found the other day when I was in a boat and I was holding the steering of the boat and my wife was holding the steering of the boat, and we were going into opposite directions. She wanted to go near the edge where she felt it would be safe, but I felt we'd crash into something. So she was going one way and I wanted to go out into the middle of the water where I felt it would be safer. And we were doing two opposite things. And in the end, I said, my wife, you are the captain. You take us where you want to go. You got to make a decision. Who is the leader? And so I made a decision. My wife was the leader. And it was a paddle boat. So she said, Sam, you can be the paddles and paddle really hard. So I was the engine driving the boat. We all have fears and insecurities. I guess one of mine over the years has been financial. And so I'm always careful to know, do we have enough finances? And so we all have fears and insecurities. Some people are afraid of what other people say. Many of my friends are afraid to speak up because they're afraid that other people may have thoughts about that. So we all have different fears, different insecurities. And when you're managing a team, we have to be aware of that. We all have different aspirations and values and goals. Some people are evangelists, want to see everyone born again. I'm a teacher. I want to see everyone learn lots. So the more you can write, and the more deeper you can think, then that excites me. But we're all different. We all have different values as well. We all have different understandings of reality. Some people are great miracle workers. They believe God does great miracles. I remember once I had a sore tooth. And I thought I could be a miracle worker. So I prayed for my tooth. God, heal my tooth. God, heal my tooth. I went to the dentist and he said he needed lots of money for fixing my tooth. So I prayed again. God, heal my tooth. God, heal my tooth. I was teaching a class like this, and one of the students in the class said, didn't you study at a certain university? And don't they teach dentistry? And I said, yes. And they said, do you know they can heal your tooth? So I went and talked to the university and they said yes. And they checked and they found this tooth needed fixing, this tooth needed fixing, this tooth needed fixing, and they fixed all the teeth that needed fixing in my mouth. So God didn't do a miracle like some people look for. He did a miracle by showing me the people who were able to do the miracle I needed, and it was the dentists and doctors. So that was a miracle. And each of us may find different ways to do a miracle. Your car may break down and you may pray for your car, and then someone comes along who's a good mechanic, or your motorbike may break down and someone comes along who's a good mechanic who fixes you. And that can be a miracle from God. So God works in many ways, and each of you have different abilities and different skills to offer. Leadership often requires us to understand what's happening in our lives. What are the personal issues in our lives? Understanding our emotions and when we're still mature or immature. Narcissism is when we're just focused on ourselves, and that's not healthy. Being unaware of self can be a problem. We need to stand in a mirror more, not just to look at the outside, but also to look at the inside. And praying and journaling, we can look at what's going on inside our lives. Self-understanding and self-reflection are important for personal growth. As you grow, this will increase confidence and motivation. And as you reflect, this will help you get a deeper understanding of how to relate to others. One of the most important aspects of personal growth is self-awareness, knowing who you are. Who are some scholars who've written on this? One is Daniel Goleman. And so can everyone write down the word Daniel Goleman? And if we go to Daniel Goleman and type in leadership, and we're looking at leadership development, then we could find some insights on that. Daniel Goleman also writes about emotional intelligence. So can I get everyone to write down Daniel Goleman, Daniel, and then Goleman, Goleman, and then emotional intelligence. This means understanding emotions, your emotions, other people's emotions. So Daniel Goleman, emotional intelligence. And if you go to some of the material on the internet, you'll find some valuable material there on emotional intelligence from Daniel Goleman. Also, in your assignment, you could go to Google Scholar and you could find some resources there from Daniel Goleman on emotional intelligence, and you'd be able to interact with that. And so we've got emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman. You can cite that, you can read it, and that would give you some valuable insights there. Let's go to some insights that Daniel Goleman presents. So Goleman says that we need to understand ourselves if we're going to understand the best way to relate to others. He says we need to recognize everything that's going on in our own lives, in our emotions and thoughts and what's driving us. When we understand that, that can help us understand what's going on in the social world around us. And we can empathize with how people feel. And so when I was pastoring a church and someone came up to me and said, I don't like what you're preaching, I don't like what you're doing in church, I realized that it wasn't just me that they were talking to. There were things going on in their own lives. And so I became less reactionary and worried about what they said about me and more interested in what was going on in their own lives. And I listened and I said, well, tell me, what is it that you don't like? And they said, oh, you're not speaking enough about this or that. And I realized these were the areas they were concerned about in their lives. It wasn't so much what was happening in my life or the church, it was what was happening in their life. And so knowing about yourself helps you to know about others and to empathize with them and to understand. Knowing about yourself also helps to bring self-control. And so when you know that you tend to react or you tend to get disappointed and sad, you can begin to respond in various ways. Anyone here eat chocolate when you get sad? Any hands going up? Yes. It's probably not the best thing to do, but going for a walk, praising God, listening to some Christian music, all of these things can be better ways to respond, and praying it through. So self-control is when we think through and work through what we should do. And then finally, developing social skills. So we're better listeners, better understanding, better relating, better working with people. All of this grows out of these 4 steps from Daniel Goleman's model of emotional intelligence. And this is just one of many models of emotional intelligence that he has provided. Another one of his models talks about the importance of self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, and all these aspects of the self, and you could work with those as well. So there's a lot that we can do to grow in self-awareness and self-management. So the first task that we're going to ask you to do is going to reflect on ways to develop a better understanding of yourself. So reflect on ways to develop a better understanding of yourself. And we've thought about some of these ways to develop a better understanding of ourself. And some of them include journaling, others include talking to others, others include expressing how we feel in talking to others, or in prayer, in Bible reading, reflecting on what's God saying to me. Poetry is another. So there are many ways in which we can reflect. But the 2 main ways are writing and talking through with others and having people that we work with. So let's take our 10-minute break now, and we'll come back in 10 minutes and look further at ways you can grow and develop as yourself. And remember, the end of today, your leadership assignment is to reflect on why an understanding of self is important, and also to reflect on ways to develop a better understanding of ourself. Thank you again for those who've sent in their assignments. I think everyone's done that for day 2, assignment 2 from yesterday. So thank you. There's some great work there on Bible and leadership. And I look forward to reading what you write for today, day 3. Thank you, and see you shortly after the break.